Hey guys, Jacqueline here with Zenith Home Loans. Thank you so much for joining us again for another one of our webinar series, just talking to different members of the community that fortunately all happen to be my clients that have really cool businesses. And the one today happens to do with home ownership, which is an added bonus, I think. So we can just talk a little bit more about kind of real estate and how things are going. So today I have Luke Meyers with Colorado Native Painting. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So why don't you just kind of introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit about what got you into painting houses?
So I'm Luke Meyers. I started Colorado Native Painting about 5 years ago. But I started painting on a crew actually in college and did that for about 4 or 5 years as well. So that's kind of where I learned the skill of painting, and then moved into the construction industry and kind of saw how poorly homeowners are treated by contractors, and just kind of wanted to jump in and see how I could help with that. So I knew painting, and so I decided to start that company, and hopefully now we're adding some customer service that wasn't in the industry before.
Yeah, that's a really cool. Because that was going to be my question. It's like, so why painting? And so now it sounds like, well, hey, I know how to do this thing, and I see a lack of service that I would have liked to have, and then turning that into a career. That's super cool. And so, how have you found with just kind of the market as it's been going, and supply chain issues and things like that? Like, how have you seen that affect your business so far?
Last year it was actually pretty significant. We saw price increases, and we still are in paint. But last year specifically, throughout the summer, it was very difficult to find paint. So if you didn't have good relationships with your painting reps and things like that, it was really difficult to get the product even put on your house.
Yeah.
So that was something that we had to work through.
Awesome. Well, not awesome, but good information so that people kind of know, like, okay, yeah, that's why this is taking so long. Like, sorry, I would love to schedule you. Well, cool. Well, I have a handful of questions. And so I'll just kind of jump right into it. So how long does it usually take to paint the interior of a home by a professional versus not a professional?
So it's very it very much depends on what you're doing and how much your house you're painting, and what surfaces. But typically you can expect it to be done within a week. And the things that kind of go into either making that a longer process or a shorter are number of colors you're putting on your walls. So we consider like a room, if you have baseboards, a wall, and a ceiling, that's going to actually be considered 3 different colors. Because there's 2 different areas that we have to cut that paint and essentially create a line differentiating between the 2 colors. So that type of thing adds time. So if you're just doing walls, that can go a little bit quicker, or if you're using the same color on the ceiling or baseboards as you are on the walls. The other thing that we find is if people are moving or just purchased a home, if we can get in there before they move all of their stuff, we're able to move a little bit quicker, because we're not trying to cover up all of your furniture and things like that.
And then what about exterior? Does that take about a week as well?
Yeah, and that again is going to be dependent upon the size of the home, but we're typically in and out somewhere between 2 and 5 days. Yeah.
And then, so let's say I already live in the property, what kind of things can I do as a homeowner to either interior or exterior? Like, what's the best way for me to prepare to make your job as easy and efficient as possible, so we can, because as fast as you guys want to get in and out, we want you out of our houses just as quickly because of the inconvenience factor. So like, what can I do as a homeowner to make that as easy for everybody as possible?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question, because that is something that we really have to work on, setting expectations at the beginning of the job. Because for interior, especially going back to trying to get in before you move in, if you do have all of your furniture in the house and things on the wall, we have to move around that. So taking pictures, heirlooms, things off the walls, and then moving your furniture away from the wall so that we can access that is going to be super helpful. And occasionally, if we're working with somebody who can't get things off the wall, or there's one big item, we'll try to help with that. But the more that you can have off the walls is going to be helpful. And the same goes for exterior or the outside of your home. If you've got wood piles up against the house or patio furniture, things like that. Just taking those out and moving them away and giving us as much space as possible is going to be helpful.
And then, so on the interior stuff, so I'm taking things off of the wall. Does it make sense for me to also patch the wall, or is that something you guys prefer to do, or does it matter?
Yeah, it does. It's not a huge difference other than hopefully we're able to do it a little bit better.
Right.
It's always helpful if you want something patched for it to be done before we get there. But that is something we can do. If it's extensive or there's big holes, then we obviously have to charge a little bit more.
Right.
And that can slow things down depending upon how big the repair area is, because we've got to let that mud dry and have it be ready to accept the paint.
Okay. And then on the exterior, let's say I have like a huge tree or a bush or something that's coming right up against the house. How, obviously I can't move the tree or the bush. So what can I do in that scenario, or what do you guys recommend?
So I typically recommend trimming it if you can.
Okay.
Obviously, depending upon the time of year, that's not always feasible or a good idea. So even just tying it up or tying branches back away from the house.
Okay.
If you guys have gardens or things like that up against the house, we do try to tread lightly in those areas and cover the plants up so that we're not getting an excessive amount of paint. But some of that is just going to be inevitable especially with foliage, because it's just so inconsistent with how it kind of comes up against the house. So I think anything that you can do to get it away from the house is helpful. And if you can't, we'll just do our best to work around it.
Got it. And then should I power wash my house and like get dirt and grime off of the house, or does that impact anything?
That's definitely something that needs to be done, but we offer that as a part of our service. So every exterior that we do, we actually do a full pressure wash of the house and make sure that we get all the big stuff off. That can be it can be difficult because there's going to be some areas where we can't hit with water, or another big thing that homeowners can do to help with that is just make sure your windows are closed when we come to do the pressure washing, because the number of houses that we've showed up and they're out of town and they want their house painted while we're gone, and we find 2 or 3 windows just slightly open, that can really create a problem for us. Yeah.
Whoopsie-daisy. Yeah, that's probably it's be like, so we did our best, but there's only so much we can do, right?
Right. And we do, when we come back out after pressure washing, if there's something on the wall still, we're going to clean it off, because we're not going to put paint over a dirty wall. But the pressure washing is definitely the first step that we want to do. Okay,
perfect. And then if someone was going to paint themselves, whether it was the interior or exterior, what kind of mistakes do you generally see people make that you want to tell people to stop doing? Or maybe just because if you've never painted a house before, you're like, oh, I can totally do this. And then it's one of those DIY projects. You're like, oh, maybe I can't do this. So what kind of things do you usually see people make mistakes with?
Yeah. So kind of the first piece of this is painting is definitely a skilled labor. A lot of people think it's pretty easy, just put the paint on the wall and it'll be fine. But my guys have been doing this for a long time, and it really becomes kind of an art to them.
Right.
And they've learned from their dads and grandpas, and it kind of goes through the family for most of them. But that being said, they have a lot of that skill that if you don't have it, you're going to make mistakes that you don't even know are mistakes to begin with.
Right.
And some of those relate to the tools that you have. So if you don't have the correct brush or the correct roller or whatever you're working with, it can apply the paint incorrectly, or make it be a little bit too thin or a little too thick. So we'll see, on an interior, somebody will be rolling a wall and they'll try to go on extra thick to cover up the past paint. And then they'll start seeing drips and lines where it kind of starts to sag. So it's really an art there. Another big one interior is when you're cutting in, they'll put paint or put tape down, and due to the texture on walls, there is a void between that tape and the wall. So you'll actually get bleed through underneath the tape that makes that line look awful. Right. And so if you don't know how to handle that, you're going to have an issue there. And a lot of them have, what's that?
That I've done that before.
Yeah.
I'm like, why is it there? I put the tape down.
Right. Yeah, and it just bleeds through, and it's really an easy fix. I mean, I have at times tried to help people figure out how to do things, because maybe they want us to come in and do the majority of the house, but they have that one room that they're going to help their kids paint. They're going to do it as a family or something. And so certain things, you can caulk that tape line and try to keep that paint from bleeding over. But even things like in a house, the construction or the drywall and everything that goes into building that wall, it often isn't actually perfectly straight, or the angles aren't correct. So if you follow the line where the ceiling meets the wall, you may have it perfectly lined up with that intersection, but when you stand back, it looks super crooked because the wall wasn't built straight. So so just knowing, I mean, we'll either come down on the wall just slightly, or we'll go up on the ceiling just slightly, and that makes for like a perfect line. But there's just a lot of little things like that if you haven't painted before, you just don't even know what you don't know. So you're just going to stumble around with some of that.
Yeah. And then what kind of mistakes do you see on the exterior of a home?
So especially during the summer, because that's when most people are going to paint exterior, we'll see people that they're painting the side of a house right when the sun is beating down on that side. And so you'll have what's called flashing, and you'll start seeing splotchy areas on the side of your wall. In fact, a lot of new construction, if you drive through the neighborhoods, the painters are probably very good painters, but they're being paid a very low wage to get that track home painted as quickly as possible. So they're out there and they're just going as fast as they can. And so you'll see those areas where it flashed. And so if you just drive by a house and you look on the walls, especially south facing, you're going to see those areas of blotchiness. So kind of making sure that the temperatures are correct, and cutting in, making sure that you caulk all the cracks and gaps that you need to. And the alternative to that too is making sure that you don't caulk areas that shouldn't be. So with any home, there's going to be areas where the flashing is such where if you do caulk an area, it can actually keep moisture in the wall, and you can start having issues with rotting and mold and things like that behind the actual boards. So you don't want to get too carried away with caulking either. So it's again, there's a lot of little things that if you don't even know what to look for, you're gonna miss them. Right.
That makes sense. Can I paint over wallpaper?
You can. Yeah.
Is there any tricks to doing that and making it like look okay?
Yeah. So first, you want to make sure that that it isn't peeling already. So if that wallpaper is coming off, obviously, then your paint's going to come off with it.
Right.
But if it's adhered well to the wall still, just going through and caulking the seams and making sure that that's flat, that'll kind of take out the lines or whatever you see in that. And then making sure that you put a good primer on, because it's like a board or drywall. If you don't prime it, then your paint isn't going to stick the way it should. And then you run into the risk of peeling paint or just not adhering correctly.
And then what about any like tricks or tips around painting like more textured walls? So like those walls that you see that have like those big swooshes in the wall, I don't even know what they're called, or like the heavier texture, like the kind of the dimple pattern, or even stucco. Is there anything to know about any of those if I'm going to go and paint a room?
Yeah, I mean, you want to make sure that you get it from every angle. And so, we'll look at a wall and determine from there what we want to do. So maybe we're spraying the house, but one area is going to be more conducive to rolling, just to make sure that you get behind the little edges and things like that. Another thing that we'll do, like on really rough sawn wood, is occasionally we'll go back and back roll. So we'll spray it, and then someone will go behind and actually roll again, just to make sure that you get into those areas. And that's something too on the exterior. People will buy a sprayer and they'll go paint the exterior of their home, and they'll kind of go straight at the wall, and they'll miss the underside of the siding boards. And so that's a common area that doesn't get hit. And that's also a common area to find peeling. So extra important to get those areas and extra easy to miss them.
Okay. And then on exterior stuff, so we see lots of different kinds of exterior. So you've got brick, you've got stucco and things like that. Is there any exterior surface that you shouldn't paint that just doesn't make sense to? Because I mean, I know you can paint brick and nobody recommends that necessarily, but there are ways around it, obviously.
Right. And that's the thing. I mean, depending upon who you talk to, you'll get different answers. If you talk to a stucco guy, they're going to say absolutely do not paint stucco. And it's mainly because you're removing the texture that you paid for when you paid for stucco. So as you start filling in all those gaps and little areas of texture, you start losing the quality of stucco. But it can be done, and you just need to use the correct paint. And same with brick, using a masonry paint and making sure that you cover it completely and put on a good primer. You can paint it. There's also a lot of other ways of doing it. One's German schmear, which is kind of makes it look like that old European brick look. There's also a lot of companies that are out there staining brick now. And so, there's a lot of options, and you can get away with doing any of them. It's just, you want to make sure that the person that's applying the coating is doing it properly. Yeah.
That's good to know. I have a stucco house and I can't stand the color and I just want to paint it.
And
I didn't want stucco. It just happens to be the house we bought and it happened to be stucco. I'm like, oh, I just don't like it. But it's fine. It's fine. But I know I can tell my husband we can paint the house. I talked to an expert. So if I'm doing so this is more like on the decorating side of things. On the interior, do you think accent walls or those patterns that you see on like Pinterest and everything else with the tape and all of that stuff, like, are those a good idea, or does it just make sense to keep things more simplified? Or is it just whatever's on trend?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be a personal choice. I think accent walls look awesome. I think it kind of gives you that customized look to your home. You can add some color and keep everything else a little bit more neutral. But the patterns I struggle with, just because if you're doing it yourself, it can be incredibly frustrating to get it correct. It's not impossible, but again, just even knowing the texture that you're dealing with can make it very difficult. But I think they look cool, and we can definitely do it. It's just it adds a lot of time, and it would add a surprising amount to the price of the paint job too, to do that type of thing. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. They're cool patterns. There's lots of really cool ideas out there. I'm just like, oh, that seems like a lot. I had a friend she hand stenciled her wall. I'm like, that is commitment. It looks beautiful. She goes, it was a nightmare. Don't ever do it. I'm like, noted. Because once you start, you can't stop. Right. Yep. Yeah. And when I was on a painting crew, we actually had a guy, he was a big Ohio State fan, huge Ohio State fan. And so he had a wall in his like man cave, and he wanted half of it, the red of the Ohio State, and then the other half, I think it's a gray, if I remember correctly. And then basically a line down the middle of the wall, and then in the middle we used a projector and projected up the Ohio State logo and then painted it in, and it looked really cool when we were done, but it was a lot of work. That's a very specific thing for whoever buys that house next. So probably getting painted over, which is probably is like, you guys are probably like, oh, we did so much work, and someone is eventually just going to paint over this. Yep. So do you recommend somebody always hire a professional to paint the exterior, just based on some of the stuff that you said so far today? Yeah, I would. I mean, even on my own home, I would probably hire somebody or have my crew come out and do it, mainly because it's such a time taking deal, especially if you're doing it alone. And again, it's that skilled labor piece of things. If you don't have that skill, then you're just going to run into issues, and it can be done, but you're probably going to run into a lot of frustrations. And and if we come out, we can get it done at a very high level, and be in and out pretty quick. And also you have, the safety issues of climbing ladders, and not everybody's comfortable climbing ladders or has the correct tools to do things. And so, I would always suggest to hire a professional in most things, but with painting and any other skilled labor, I definitely would. Yeah.
And then I feel like a lot of people probably don't know this, but so for homes built prior, I think it's 1972. So there's extra precautions because of lead-based paint. And so as a real estate professional, obviously I know about that, you do as well. But what if I know my home was built prior to that date and it's possible I have some original paint on the home, what kind of precautions, specifically exterior, do I need to take before kind of taking that step into, okay, I'm going to repaint my house?
Yeah, so it has to be tested, obviously, for lead. And even if we're given a test that is negative, we will do a second test to ensure that it is negative. And if it is positive for lead, then there's just a lot of other pieces that go into it. So the state can actually come out and check on us and make sure that we're doing it correctly. And so you basically have to create a bubble around the home. So that's like putting masking all the way from the roof to the ground so that none of that dust or debris kind of comes off the house and into somebody or in contact with someone. My guys have to wear respirators when they're working in there. They can't leave any material on the ground overnight. So if they've scraped off some old paint, they actually have to go around and clean all of that up at the end of each day, just to make sure that no kids are getting around and picking it up and putting it in their mouth. Or so it's doable. We do it, but it's a process that you want to have somebody that knows what they're doing, or else it can end up costing a lot more. And just even being aware that you have lead on your home is important.
Yeah. We had, I used to live in the Highlands or in Sunnyside specifically, and our house was built in like 1922 or something like that. And when we painted the exterior, it tested positive for lead. And I know about lead-based paint disclosures and all of that stuff, but it never occurred to me this extra step we had to take. And we tested positive. And so they had all this extra tarps and stuff out to make sure that when they sprayed the house, that the debris didn't get into the ground or the groundwater. I was like, okay, this is good to know for other people, because if you have a house that old, and a lot of houses are that old, especially in that part of town, you're going to run into that.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
What is the best time of year to paint the exterior of a home?
So that's an interesting question. It's a lot less about the time of year and more about temperature. So we can paint anywhere between 45 degrees and 90 degrees.
When do you like to paint houses?
I personally like the spring or fall. Just because the temperatures are a 70-degree day is better for anyone to be working outside than a 90-degree day. But the other thing is too, I mean, in the winter, we're oftentimes not as busy. And so you're going to probably get a better price if you're painting your house during the winter. You might have to wait 2 months to get that week of good weather to be able to do it. But yeah, so price wise, probably winter, as the painter, spring or fall, but the summer up to 90 degrees is fine. And that's both air temperature, but it's also the temperature of the wall that we're painting, so that we don't get that flashing issue and have that paint dry too fast or too slow or whatever if it's too cold. So yeah.
Do you have, are there flashing issues on the interior? Like, let's say the wall I'm painting is south facing and the sun's just beating down on it, but I'm painting the interior wall. Is there like some extra precautions there that you've got to pay attention to?
I've never run into that. I mean, you should have enough insulation on the wall that you don't have that radiating heat come through. And I mean, I guess potentially if you have a lot of windows, you could on a really hot day, have sun beat down and kind of hit that wall and make it difficult to get it on without flashing. But I've never run into an issue with flashing interior.
Okay, that's good to know. So any tips for somebody that's like, I'm prepping to sell my house? Like, what kind of tips would you, for somebody who's getting ready just to prep either the exterior or the interior? Obviously we hear it's like the exterior, that's the first thing that they're going to see. Like, should I always paint the exterior of my house, or what things should I at least make sure are taken care of in or out if I'm going to prep a home, knowing I probably don't want to invest a ton of money into something like this because I'm about to sell the house?
Right. Yeah. The what I try to keep in mind, and like when I sold our last house, is basically
We lost him. Hang on, team. We'll get him back here for you just a second. So hopefully you guys have found this information super helpful. We're going to have links to all of Luke's information at the end of this recording so that you guys can get in contact with him if you want some advice, maybe want to have him come check your house out and maybe just see kind of some of the things that he can do. And then we'll hopefully get you guys in contact. So let's see if we can get him to join us again. We might have lost him for good, which is okay, because lots of really good information. I had 2 final questions for him. And so I'll make sure, oh, good, we got him back. Hang on. We get you back? Oh, good, we got you back. I was just vamping. Can you hear us?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry.
No worries. No, you're totally fine. I was just vamping, telling everybody how we were going to get in contact with you after the fact. So what did we say? So we're talking about any tips that you might have for somebody looking to sell their house.
Yeah. So I think I started off by saying when I sold my house last, what I was keeping in mind is basically when you're selling your house, you're probably having somebody coming in that's going to buy it and either want to change the paint right away or do it in the next little bit. So I typically try to steer people away from doing a full repaint because I think it would probably end up being you wouldn't get your money's worth in the end. However, putting a fresh coat on also does make it appear, and hopefully it means also that you are taking care of your home. And so the things that they can't see, like furnace filters, if you're taking care of your paint and making sure that that's taken care of, then you're probably also changing your furnace filters when you're supposed to. So I think it's more just they come in feeling like that the home has been maintained. Yeah. But you can, as long as the paint's not too old and faded, you can get in and kind of touch up or scrape some of the areas of peeling paint or cracking paint, and then just kind of touch up those areas and make them look a little bit better. Interior is the same way. I mean, unless it's pretty well beat up, I think you're probably fine because people are going to come in and repaint it. If you are going to paint, I think staying with neutral colors is really important. And I know realtors are always trying to push their homeowners that way too. But it can also be a way to make an update or make something look fresh without putting a whole bunch of money into it. Like you can paint your cabinets and it makes your whole kitchen look brand new instead of actually replacing them. You can paint old wood shelves like around a TV area or something, and it goes from the 1950s or 60s look to 2022. So yeah, it's kind of an open-ended answer there, but
do you usually see people, I guess, the accent wall, great for me, this Ohio State wall, awesome for that guy, but should I paint over those kinds of things?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not an interior decorator, but I know like my personal thought is I think anything that makes your home a little less personalized to you is probably a good thing. And so like that Ohio State, I mean, who knows, maybe you get somebody that comes in there and they're
like, this is my house.
And they're like or an Ohio State fan, and they sell it right there. But so I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I do think that there's maintenance issues. So like peeling paint, or, you have a kid's room where they've drawn all over the walls, or there's a hole in the wall, patching that and painting that room potentially. But I think just kind of keeping it neutral and trying to I mean, honestly, cut corners as far as not getting into painting the entire house, but getting it to a point where it is appealing to the buyer. Right.
And then, so that brings up a good point. So when it comes to peeling paint, is there anything that can be done to avoid that from happening, whether it be the interior or the exterior?
Yeah, when you're actually painting, just making sure that you use a good primer is really your best bet to keep it from peeling. Because as long as it has that primer adhered to whatever the material is, whether it's drywall or wood, whatever you put over that should stick to it very well. And you shouldn't really run into that issue, within a reasonable amount of time. The other issues, if you have like a horizontal surface where water sits, those areas are going to probably peel regardless, just because they do catch water. But other than that, I mean, if you prime it correctly and apply the paint correctly, it shouldn't peel.
Are those paints that have, like, you see the one, and I don't know all of the different brands and stuff that they sell on a consumer level anymore, but like the ones that have the primer built in, are those good, or does it make more sense? Like, do you see more quality if you do the primer and then the paint and keep those two things separate?
Definitely doing them separate. I think is a good idea. It's such a specific product that goes into the primer, that it's like having your shampoo and conditioner in the same bottle.
Yeah,
it's like,
that's a good point. That's a good comparison. Well done.
Thank you. But it's like, are you really getting the full benefit of either one if they're trying to mix them and they're different chemical compositions, things like that. So I would always steer someone more towards doing a good primer coat and then put the paint on top. Okay.
Good to know. Any other things that we didn't talk about that you want to make sure that people know when it comes to painting their houses, whether it's personally or being done by a professional?
Yeah, I think if you're doing it personally, just do your research. Don't take the guy at the paint store's word for everything. Make sure you're looking into the tools that you're using, and you're not just kind of jumping at even paint quality. I mean, there's some paints out there that are very expensive, and it's more of a designer thing than actually the makeup of the paint. And so you can end up buying paint that's really, really expensive, but you're not really getting the benefit of like a longer lasting product. And that's not true across the board, but there are things like that where you can kind of save yourself money by just doing some research.
Okay.
The other thing that I think is important to keep in mind is just that if you keep up with painting in your home, then it makes it a lot easier and cheaper going forward to do that later on in the future. Just like, I mean, we've been in our home for, I believe it's been about 4 years now, and I'm already considering painting our exterior because the contractor that built our home, they get a painting contractor to come in and paint. And so they're going as quick as they can. And I've found a lot of areas that just either didn't get painted. It's very thin. There wasn't good caulking used. And so you have potential areas where right now it's fixed with just another coat of paint. Right. And 2 years from now, it's maybe board replacement. Beyond that, maybe it's the whole wall is, you're getting mold or mildew or rot. And so I think keeping up and maintaining it before it needs it is going to save you a lot of money in the long run.
Okay. Awesome. Why do you love painting houses?
I actually, doing it in college, I really enjoyed it because it was pretty cathartic. I mean, you throw your music on and you take a wall and it's like vacuuming a room. Instant gratification, or mowing the lawn. You're like, you look at it and you're like, oh man, that looks so good. And with painting, it's the same way. I mean, you put a fresh coat of paint on any wall and instantly it just looks nice and fresh and clean. And as far as owning a painting company now, my biggest thing is I just really enjoy meeting the homeowner and just kind of hearing more about them, and kind of like you doing these interviews with people. I just find it fascinating to meet new people, and whenever anybody's doing a project, there's a lot of things that go beyond it. And you hear about somebody's graduation, or they're moving somewhere, they just moved from somewhere, and it's just I just enjoy that interpersonal connection.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you again for your time. That's all of the questions that I had. That was super helpful. I think we're going to be able to help a lot of people. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show today, we're going to link all of the ways that we can get in contact with you in case somebody has more questions for you, or hopefully maybe wants to use you for some services. So again, I really, really genuinely appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much.